big ball. Going for the big shot, and he hits it.
That's batted into the air, intercepted, and the Bears are going to win it.
So we got Caleb Williams debunking what basically became a national media crisis, if that's what we want to go ahead and term it. We are about 72 hours away from the Bears' first preseason game, so finally time for this team to go ahead and take the field. I think there's 3 more preseason games going on right now as we are recording this, but welcome into the Halas Beat, brought to you by the Bear Report. Steve, Letizia, and Usayd Koshul here. Check us out on Twitter at Halas Beat, at CFC Bears, at Usayd Koshul. Steve, I don't know about you, but the time's finally here for the Bears to take the field. Obviously, the joke amongst us is that this team is 1-0 in 2025 because they beat the Packers, but they've taken a lot more W's as well as a result of the offseason moves and the hiring. But this is probably, to me, going to be the most anticipated preseason game for the Bears since I don't even know when at this point, dude.
Yeah, I mean, probably since the last time they had a coach change, that first preseason game after a coaching change, you get a new quarterback too, like stuff like that. Like it's always a little bit more heightened that you're excited to see what the Bears look like. I'm excited to see what the Bears just play against a team that's not the Bears because, training camp practices are fun and all to talk about and stuff, but can't really get a whole lot. I think it's still preseason, so it's not a full showing of what we're going to expect in the regular season, but you can at least get a little bit more out of it than just practices against your own team. So, man, Bears football is back. It feels good.
Yeah, and I should mention, so we're recording this on August 7th. The Bears do have joint practices scheduled with the Dolphins on August 8th, so that's going to take place at Halas. It will be a nice opportunity for the Bears beat to kind of talk to some of the best players on Miami's roster, and then vice versa as well, really to just get an idea of how Mike McDaniel has kind of continued to progress his 4th year in, because I remember, a couple of years ago when the Bears were in the market for a new head coach, I mean, they didn't even bother interviewing Mike McDaniel, which then that Dolphins, I think, clip of Mike McDaniel standing up there in front of the team went viral. I know for a fact I was one of the guys that was just like, wow, look, the Bears didn't even give this guy a interview, and look how fired up he is compared to whatever Matt Eberflus gave us. But, this preseason game, there's, I think, a ton of different storylines to go ahead and watch here because we know who our high-end starters are for this team. There's no question about it. I mean, everybody's going to be watching the Caleb Williams and the Roma Dunze and the DJ Moores, those types of guys. Everyone's going to be watching Montez Sweat. But I think really the biggest storyline here is that for a roster that has a lot of starters set in place, regardless of what the depth chart says, we're still figuring out what this team is going to do in terms of some of those second, third, fourth string guys that are basically using preseason to fight for spots at this point.
Yeah, the way every time I watch a preseason game for the Bears, what I always am most excited to see is not necessarily, the top guys, like you said, like obviously Caleb Williams in first game in a Ben Johnson offense is going to be a storyline, as it should be. You want to see him do well. The left tackle position, who plays there is going to be important. But what I'm always looking for in this first preseason game is who plays how much and when, because it gives you a good idea. I mean, I know they released the depth chart, but this is such a preliminary depth chart. I don't think it really means that much. I want to see, who are the first guys after the starters. Like you said, we kind of have a pretty good idea of 99% of the starters, who they're going to be, who comes in after them, how much do they play, obviously what they look like as well. That's going to be a big part of it, but mostly just who is getting those second team reps, because I think that's going to mean a lot. And like, for me specifically, I'm looking at the offensive line, because you're not getting through a full season with only starting 5 offensive linemen. At some point, those backup offensive linemen are going to have to play. So I want to see who gets that first shot, with the second team, how much they play and what they look like. Guys like, obviously we don't exactly know who's going to be the starter at left tackle. Is it Ozzie? Is it Braxton? But even like the interior guys, I wouldn't be surprised if like Joe Thuney, for example, doesn't play in the preseason game, even if the other starters do, because he's a veteran. He doesn't really need it. So what does Luke Newman look like? Is Ryan Bates going to come back and be fully healthy? Bill Murray, I thought flashed last year. Is he going to come into a new offense and look like a serviceable offensive lineman. All those guys, that's kind of really what I'm going to be watching. And it's, O-line, D-line is always, what I gravitate towards first. So I want to see what those backups look like.
I mean, you talk about the trenches on the offensive side of the ball. It is equally as important to focus on the trenches on defense, and that's specifically because I'm not going to turn this into the Bears should trade for Micah Parsons conversation. That's, I think, one we might have to have in a few weeks. But, and again, that's just me messing around here. So we'll take that for what it's worth, although sometimes I do like to be passive-aggressive and drop hints here and there. But you talk about the defensive side of the ball here, and it's interesting because the Bears paid Montez Sweat. They paid Dayo Odeyingbo in free agency. Odeyingbo sort of is the more interesting one of the two, simply because he's never really lived up to the stud pass rusher that the Bears basically paid him to be. A lot of people argue that was just mass dysfunction in Indianapolis, with Frank Reich being there for a couple of years, then he gets fired, then you go ahead and then you bring in Shane Steichen. It's like Shane Steichen is now dealing with a quarterback conundrum there that he has to sort of figure out. In between all this is, Chris Ballard, who was supposedly supposed to be the Bears GM 10 years ago, but I guess the Bears dodged a bullet with Chris Ballard, even though he was in the front office. And so I'm looking specifically to see, circling back to this pass rusher conversation, is who is going to be sort of that third pass rusher that really steps up. Because the Bears right now are banking on Montez Sweat being fully healthy and Montez Sweat basically having more consistency and more stability around him in order to produce like the former first round pick that he is, which again, they gave up basically was a high second round pick for him. But then I think the other part of this whole thing ends up coming down to the fact that you look at what the Bears have in terms of that pass rushing group, and it's like, well, you can't really say you're going to get much out of Jamari Karoma or Xavier Carlton or even Daniel Hardy, because he's just a special team stud at this point. Odeyingbo, you hope, lives up to $16 million a year. So it's really, to me at this point, it is Austin Booker's for the taking. Regarding some of the speculation about what specifically could happen if potentially the Bears decide to move a guy like Gervon Dexter to the outside, I think those plans are put on hold, and you're not going to see it in this first preseason game. And the plans are on hold until Shamar Turner comes back and Andrew Billings is fully healthy.
Yeah, the game plans for both the offense and the defense are going to be watered down, just basic stuff. So yeah, if they do have plans to move Gervon Dexter to the outside, I agree with you. I don't think you're gonna see it. But yeah, the defensive line definitely need to see something. Montez Sweat, like you said, you pay him to be a top tier pass rusher. You gave up a pick for him to be a top tier pass rusher. We need to start seeing it. By all accounts, he's at a pretty good camp, which is very encouraging. So hopefully, that translates when they actually play other teams. Austin Booker, we've talked about him a lot, but I think he is a perfect. He played really well last preseason, and then didn't really do much in the regular season. Is he going to be a guy who's just that specialty, that preseason stud every year who never really takes the next step? Like, man, I'm blanking on his name, but the guy for the Bears, the pass rusher for the Bears the last few years, he always played in the preseason, but then got cut this last year. Can't remember his name, but anyway, he always a guy who had a lot of sacks in preseason and never really put it together in the regular season. Is Austin Booker going to be that guy who's going to take the next steps? They've also talked up Dominic Robinson a lot, so I think he's a guy I'm going to be watching just because they've talked him up a lot. The thing with Dominic Robinson is when he was drafted, he was always a raw project, and he's going into year 3 now. And it's time for, if you are a raw project to kind of start showing something, because he really hasn't shown anything yet. But only because they've talked him up a lot that's the reason I'm kind of watching him. So Booker, Robinson, those two guys, I need to see, something from those guys. But I think, offensive line, defensive line, there are positions that offensive line, you're going to have injuries, and defensive line, you really do need a rotation. You can't just get by with 2 guys. So you need a rotation there. So who's going to step up? I think those are really big storylines.
Yeah, I mean, and beyond just that, you mentioned Dominique Robinson basically being this completely raw project. I think people sort of forget that Dominique Robinson was a guy that played quarterback and receiver in high school, committed to Miami of Ohio as a quarterback and receiver, and then ended up switching to defensive end because they at Miami of Ohio saw him being this sort of 6'5", tall, lanky guy that was super athletic. And like, to me, quite frankly, guess what? I think that the Dominique Robinson experiment was over before training camp and 2025 even started. Because at some point you have to start to say, hey, we're going to cut bait with whatever it is that we are doing. And to me, really what it ultimately came down to is I don't think that Dominique Robinson is someone that should have a legit shot at making this roster. And I also have to say, you kind of have to fault the coaching staff for not creating enough competition between that like fourth and fifth edge rusher spot to be able to say, well, we're generally going to push Dominique Robinson. But another big storyline here to really check out is the running game here. Because if you look at that first official depth chart, well, Kyle Monangai is listed behind Travis Homer. Now, Homer obviously just re-upped his contract in Chicago, but that's a little bit interesting to me because if we typically look at Travis Homer, his role in Seattle, his role with the Bears, he is more so a player that has always been a special teams contributor, has very limited production as a running back. And so you would have thought that, maybe the Bears are, for all the public praise that Kyle Monangai's gotten from Caleb Williams and from Ben Johnson, the reality of it is that he needs to essentially come out and prove himself, and that's what the Bears are doing here. And so we might not see, because Ben Johnson hasn't spoke to the media yet, so no one knows how many series these starters are going to play, but you wonder if the Bears are genuinely holding out hope that Monangai can earn that third running back spot instead of just handing it to him.
Yeah, I think that's one of the areas on the running back position is one of the areas on the depth chart, where I don't really think we could read much into it. Kind of like you said, Travis Homer is what he is. He's a good special teams player. He's a good pass blocker. He can catch the ball a little bit, but he is a third running back kind of at best. I think Kyle Monangai, even though he's below him in the depth chart, is going to see more action this year than Travis Homer, and I think the Bears know that at this point too. Rookies in this first initial depth chart are usually, further down the depth chart, and then as the preseason goes on, that last official depth chart, they usually do jump up a little bit. Kyle Monangai is going to be interesting in this preseason game because I do think he'll get a good amount of playing time, but I also wouldn't be surprised if he, only gets a few series because the Bears might be relying on him for the regular season, and you don't want him taking a lot of hits. So I think that wouldn't surprise me at all. So I think that is something you can glean how big of a factor they think he'll be in the regular season based on how much he plays in the preseason. If he plays a lot, that's maybe you don't read into it too much, but if he only plays a series or two, that might just be because they know what they have and they don't really need to see much more from him. So I think that's something to kind of look into as well, especially with the running back position, which is a position that, you take a beating and guys guys you're expecting to rely on. You don't really want them to get too beat up in the preseason.
And speaking of watching guys in the preseason, to me, this roster has a handful of players that are really going to be worth watching. Now, to be clear here, everyone's going to be watching the Caleb Williams and the Rome Odunzes of the world. There's other guys on this roster, though, that have been given a lot of opportunity in camp so far that have made the most of it. I'm going to have an article coming out on the Bear Report website on Friday morning, which is going to discuss some of the top 5 players to watch during this game. It's not any of the obvious names like the big shots like we sort of mentioned, but one of the guys to me that's really going to be worth watching is Nishan Wright, who's been playing that cornerback position. And the reason being is because if you're the Bears at this point, I mean, you are in a sort of tough situation, let's call it how it is, because Tyreek Stevenson certainly seems to be a little bit more different, a little bit more composed compared to last year, which I should mention, irrespective of what your thoughts are on Tyreek Stevenson and the Hail Mary last year, I mean, that locker room was not, even when things were going well for the Bears during the month of October, that locker room was not as, put together, I should say, as it should have been. It got really bad toward the end of last year when Tyreek Stevenson was basically leaving the locker room before the media even walked in because he wanted nothing to do with people. But, and again, I don't blame the guy either for how bad the season was going. But, Tyreek Stevenson's a guy that has had a bit of a resurgence. Jalen Johnson was at Family Fest a couple days ago, but we don't really know when he's going to be back, and the Bears are not disclosing anything with him. They're not giving us a legitimate, measurable timeline. So that brings Nahshon right into the conversation here. And I think he's one of the most interesting guys to watch because he is 6'4". He's bigger than Tyreek Stevenson. He's long, he's lanky, he's flash in training camp. And now you kind of have to wonder, does this create a sort of dynamic to where the Bears are, without really disclosing it and saying it, Tyreek Stevenson's competing for a job with Nahshon Wright simply because Wright's come in and, been this guy that has been pretty damn valuable so far. And I think this Sunday is going to be a test of, is he really ready to compete with Stevenson for a starting spot opposite Jalen Johnson?
Yeah, I think that's been a kind of a camp battle that's maybe been under the radar a little bit this preseason. You see Nahshon Wright is with the starters, kind of people I think are chalking it up just to kind of taking over Jalen Johnson's spot while he's out. And when Jalen Johnson comes back, he'll be bumped out. But yeah, I think he brings a lot to the table with his size and his length. I think Dennis Allen, really likes him. Al Harris worked with him in Dallas, so he's, familiar with him. So, he has, the coaches kind of on his side. These coaches didn't draft Tyreek Stevenson, so even if they like him, he's not his guy. They're guys. So I think that's definitely a big one that we need to be watching. I'll throw Terrell Smith into there as well. Another guy who's flashed a little bit, especially in preseason the last couple of years. I think those three guys are going to get a lot of playing time in this game. Obviously, Jalen Johnson's not going to play. I believe Kyle Gardner went out today. We don't know the severity of the injury yet, but because of that, I would highly doubt that he plays either in the preseason game. So those three DBs and the guys behind them are going to get a lot of playing time. And yeah, I think that's a really good kind of battle to keep an eye on.
I mean, I love the fact that you brought Terrell Smith up because he, to me, is also a guy that has been semi-overlooked. I am going to go ahead and say this, though. Another player that I really think is worth watching is going to be Coulson Lovelin because there was this debate, and again, I feel like I sort of sparked this on Twitter where it was kind of just like, all right, do some of you guys still want Tyler Warren after watching that, red zone throw from Family Fest of Caleb Williams to Coulson Lovelin kind of going viral? And to be honest here, first off, I fully believe this, that Coulson Lovelin should have probably, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this too, but he probably should have been, outside of the quarterbacks, a top 5 to top 7 player in his draft class. And the reason being is because he is just that dynamic and that athletic of a player. The reason he got pushed down the board is because, number one, it's tight ends. Number two, you had a slight run on quarterbacks to open up that first round. And then I think the third thing really that everyone tends to forget is it's like when you're at Michigan, you were having to run the ball like crazy. There wasn't necessarily an opportunity for him to show off his full receiving skills, which I stand corrected. It wasn't a run on quarterbacks. It was a run on pass rushers and linemen plus Ashton Genty is really what it was. But I do think that there's a legit argument to be made that, Coulson Lovelin is not getting the praise that he deserves for just how good of a training camp he's had so far. And that's after missing all of springtime and being limited with the shoulder injury. And I think the other big thing is that this Sunday is going to really prove and show a lot of people that, for all this talk there was about, okay, 12 personnel, there's going to be a tight end in that's able to go ahead and block. You're going to see a lot more from Coulson Lovelin than just good blocking ability.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly where I had him on my big board, but it was top 10, and it was probably like 6 or 7, I believe. I had him something like that with Loveland. So I think, yeah, he's definitely, obviously all the rookies, especially the top guys that the Bears drafted this year. Those are going to be guys that everyone's going to want to watch. Everyone's going to want to, put out some clips on. So I think Loveland and the way Loveland's, it seems like every practice he's making 1 or 2 plays down the field or over the middle, and his name is popping up a lot, so I'm excited to see if he can keep that going against an actual a different team's defense. For sure, I think he's definitely a name to watch. Ozzy Trapillo too. I don't know if Braxton Jones is going to, regardless of where the camp battle is at right now, I think Ozzy Trapillo is going to get more playing time than Braxton Jones. Braxton Jones might not even play in the preseason game, depending on kind of where he is at with his. I know he's been ramping up a little bit, but they might hold him out just as a precaution. So I think Ozzy Trapillo, obviously, we're gonna want to watch him a lot too on the offense. And I'm gonna go back, to the offensive line, interior of the offensive line. I think, like I said, Bill Murray played really well last year before he got injured. So I want to see if he can kind of keep that going and be a reliable interior offensive lineman. I really like Jordan McFadden, a guy that they brought in this offseason as a free agent. He was with the Chargers. He got drafted. He was a 5th round pick, I believe, of the Chargers a few years ago. Never really made the team, but they brought him in. I saw at one point he was getting, some reps, I believe, with the first team or at least the second team. So I'm going to see what those guys, can do. I think you really need to have 7, 8 quality, offensive linemen. And as we stand right now, I don't think the Bears have that many. So I'm hoping that some of these guys kind of step up and show something that they can be reliable backups when injuries inevitably do happen.
I mean, there was a lot of, I guess, overreaction from Caleb Williams' clip during Family Fest, where it became a national thing. And I should mention, when we listen to other beat writers on other podcasts talk about the Bears fans and the Bears fan base, especially at the national level, the one commonality always seems to be that it's easy to go after the Bears on Twitter. And the reason being is because Bears fans will genuinely blow up every single post, and Bears fans will genuinely agree or disagree. And then also, in the context of things, probably the context of whatever's being discussed, probably blow things out of proportion. That to me is what happened with that 10-second clip it was. And then Caleb Williams gets up here today, the podium, and is pretty much just like, yeah, listen, guys, it wasn't necessarily me being frustrated. It was a simulation. It was a drill. And again, I'm paraphrasing here, but the exact quote that he said was, it's a quick delivery drill. You catch it. You're not trying to you're not trying to get the laces or anything. It's not like you're going through reads. It's catch, deliver, and try to deliver to the bottom left corner. We're aiming as if it's a screen. And so it's basically a drill designed to get the ball out of the quarterback's hands quicker, which I think, getting some context now, it's good that the Bears are doing this drill, because everyone's complaint last year seemed to be that Caleb Williams was holding on to the ball too long, but kind of have to hold on to the ball too long when your offensive line sucks, but also nothing is open downfield because the pass game was just not working and interconnected in any way, shape, or form. But this is also a really good reminder that the 10-second highlight clip that you see on Twitter from fans at training camp or from the Bears social media account, you can't put too much stock into that. The opposite is also true. If you hear a bad report at training camp from a beat writer, or you see a bad 10-second clip, you can't put too much stock into that as well. So it's very much a reminder, I think, that training camp, you have to have a fine line for everything.
Yeah, and that goes both ways. I think the positive ones and the negative. Don't put too much stock into the clips you're seeing on Twitter. But yeah, that one, I mean, Caleb laughed it off, as he should have. I think he had a good response when asked about that today. Yeah, I live in Wisconsin. I have a lot of Packer fan friends. I have some Viking fan friends. That clip was sent to me, I think, 4 or 5 different people of Caleb Williams, in that drill. And it's just, I mean, when I said, I just laughed too, because I know it doesn't matter. And it goes back to what I've been saying a couple times, I believe, this training camp is, we don't know what they're necessarily working on in those 10-second clips. There was one where it was Montez Sweat was in the backfield like 2 plays in a row. Okay, well, it turned out that that was a simulated pressure to see how Caleb Williams would do. It wasn't the offensive line losing. It was, that was by design. Same thing with this one. It wasn't just a drop back and throw into the net. It was, like you said, it was a quick pass. He doesn't have his hand on the laces, just trying to get it out. I think Caleb even said it was kind of a little bit of a competition between him and the other quarterbacks who can get it out the fastest. And he was maybe a little bit more concerned with getting out fast than he was with accuracy just on those reps. I believe also there was another clip on Twitter, the same drill, where he hit all 3 throws, into the pocket of the net. So yeah, it's just funny how everything is just blown up nowadays. And I think, that with the Bears, like nationally, like I said last week, the Bears get clicks, the Bears get eyes. So the national media is going to do their thing just to get Bears fans riled up and Bears fans to dunk on them because they get engagement. It just is what it is. But I think we all just need to kind of step back and remember that, we're here to have fun. This is a sport that we don't play. We're just watching it. Let's just enjoy the ride and see what happens. But I'm excited, after this week, we will actually have game tape to discuss and not just practice clips. And I'm really excited to actually talk about things that matter.
And I will say, too, with ESPN's morning show, I believe it's Get Up now. I mean, first off, they should never replace SportsCenter was the GOAT of all early morning shows, by the way. But the second thing is the ESPN's Get Up. It's ridiculous because it's like they started at 6 a.m. Eastern time during the season, I believe. It's like 7 a.m. Eastern or something. And there's always this like Monday morning clip during the season there that always discusses the Bears. It's always something Bears related, which, I mean, love him or hate him, but, Dan Orlovsky and I have kind of had the chance to interact a handful of times, and irrespective of what you think of the guy, he does make good points about where Caleb's at and why, especially with this national media crisis and whatnot, like why we shouldn't necessarily have to worry too much about him right now because he is right where he needs to be. I know Dan a couple weeks ago kind of said something like, hey, I'm interested in seeing what Caleb Williams can do with this offense. And it may take a couple of years for this offense to realize its full potential. I don't necessarily think that was a shot at Caleb Williams or Ben Johnson. I just really think what Dan was saying is, hey, listen, there's the baseline level of this offense, the 101 level, if you will, that this team's installing this year. Well, if it took Jared Goff, a seasoned veteran, irrespective of all the drama in Los Angeles, with Sean McVay 3 to 5 years to become a really good starting quarterback, and he kind of hit his peak during his 2nd/3rd season with Ben Johnson, we should expect the same amount of timeline for Caleb Williams in terms of going ahead and being able to really realize his full potential as well.
Yeah, I mean they're still doing installs if I'm not mistaken, based on what Ben Johnson has said. So they're doing things, a lot of these times the plays they're running it for the very first time. After this week, I feel like they're going to be getting into more, okay, they did installs, what's working, what's not working, let's dial it in a little bit, and then you're going to start running the plays multiple times and over again. It's not only going to, it's not only going to take maybe a couple of years to become experts in there, it's definitely going to take more than 2 weeks. So I think, it's too much right now to read into anything probably positive or negative, but I will say it does seem like they are just trending in the right direction. Every practice, it might not be linear, but it's trending upwards for the offense, which is just good to see.
And we're trending toward getting a day closer to the Bears season. When you guys hear this, if you're listening to this on Friday, August 8th, the positive is that we're about 30 days from the Bears season opener and less than a month away from the start of the NFL regular season. That is going to go ahead and do it from us. Make sure that you are giving the podcast a 5-star rating and review. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure to hit that like, comment, and subscribe button. Be sure to comment on whatever it is that you want to go ahead and discuss, or you want to see us go ahead and discuss on the show. Check out Steve and I on Twitter at CFC Bears, at Usayd Koshul, and at Halas. We will see you guys next time when, like Steve said, we're going to have actual game tape and actual sort of Bears footage to go ahead and discuss. But until then, ladies and gentlemen, bear down and have a great weekend. Enjoy the game. And if you're going this weekend, be safe because it's supposed to be a hot one in Chicago.